Oh, speaking of summaries in books, so this is really interesting. So right as our book came out, there was this odd summary of Fundamentals of Data Engineering book that also came out. Think about that. I was like, so you don't even, how did they get the book, first of all? And second, I downloaded a sample on my Kindle. There's no way I'm buying this thing, but I get the sample and I'm like, what wrote this? Not who, but like what wrote this book?
Yeah.
Because it didn't seem to fit anything at all, obviously of our book, but even of data engineering, it was just a hodgepodge of just random tech stuff. And so I looked at the publisher though, and I looked at the other books, and what was even stranger, it was like, was Alex Jones's book. It was The Great Reset was also one of the summaries that this company had done. So it's a bunch of these like fringe right-wing books and then our book. No, but it was the most bizarre thing because I started reading through this, like a human didn't write this book.
Yeah.
Joe Reis, Matt Housley, thank you so much for coming on the Kensington Neighbors podcast.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for being in Salt Lake City. It's awesome to have you here.
Well, this is long overdue. You guys published the book quite a while ago at this point, but I really wanted to make sure that we did this in person because I just like seeing you guys so much. So
well, we like seeing you too. So
amazing. Well, the obviously the big news is that you published the Fundamentals of Data Engineering book.
Yep.
It is now a bestseller, from what I understand.
It's a bestseller. Yep.
And I'm really interested in what that process is like. What's it like being an author slash celebrity now? What's it like, just being mobbed everywhere you go when people hear about the work you've done?
You're going to have to ask Joe about that.
The crowds we had to fight off just to get here. It was crazy, right? It's driving down the street. It's just... it's pretty nuts. No, it was an interesting process, I would say. Kind of started from the beginning. I mean, we had this idea for a book that I think, at least in my mind, loved Matt's take on this too. But we didn't see anything for data engineering specifically. There's like designing data intensive applications that Martin Kleppman had written, but that was more for software engineers. Actually, data engineering. I think it was about 2016, 2017 when that book came out, and data engineering wasn't really like a thing back then. It was becoming a thing, but. We really wanted to write the prequel to that book. We felt like that book is great. I think it's O'Reilly's top seller of all time, but it's like
it's an amazing
you get thrown
book.
off the deep end in that book pretty quick. And so we went like, okay, so like what could come before that? And so I don't know what else motivated it.
I think that was a lot of it just seeing kind of a lot of hunger for that kind of content. We were seeing both people making various career transitions. So for example, people transitioning from like data warehousing to data engineering, or from, Hadoop-oriented big data engineering.
Data science, data engineering.
That was our journey. And then a lot of people who were just trying to get into the field. It used to be, I think, and you can comment more on this, Ken, but data science was kind of the hot thing that people would try to get into. But we're seeing people wanting to go to boot camps, wanting to read books and go through exercises to get data engineering experience. And there just wasn't a lot of content that spoke specifically.
Wasn't a lot. I think Andreas Kretz had some awesome stuff.
Yeah, he really does.
Right, Seattle Data Guy had some content. Zach Wilson did too. But it was pretty few and far between. So.
And in terms of an O'Reilly book, I think that's the specific thing we identified.
There was an O'Reilly book.
An O'Reilly book. Yeah. So.
Yeah. It's been fascinating. I think there have been at least 3, probably more, people who I've had on the podcast who were data scientists and have now transitioned to data engineers.
Ooh.
And, they've made that transition like pretty early in their career. And
what possessed them to do such a thing as that?
So for Shashank, he's one of them.
Yeah.
He just was a lot more interested in the engineering aspect. I think the problem spoke to him. I think there's a lot more vagueness in what it means to be a data scientist now compared. Well, there is still a ton of vagueness in being a data engineer, but I think the scope of the work is generally more structured.
Yeah.
And I think that appeals to a lot of people who are more engineering focused.
Yeah.
Mark Freeman is doing mostly data engineering work now. He's really pushing that skill set
on that journey, I think.
Yeah. And his journey is kind of typical in certain ways. And maybe you could speak to this a bit as well, Ken. I know you're not super interested in becoming like a full-on data engineer.
Not yet, but after this talk.
But I think what happens a lot, and this is kind of what happened to me, is I was working on data science projects at overstock.com. And, I was trying to do stuff on my laptop, didn't scale. And so I kept looking for better ways to do those basic back-end data processing tasks. And then pretty soon I was like working on databases,
I think it's in a lot of data scientists' nature to solve problems.
Right.
And when you start looking at it, you're like, well, the problem I'm solving has this bigger issue with it. And the issue goes up the data pipeline all the way to engineering. And it's like, if I want to have a good output with what I'm building now, we need to fix that problem upstream. And I think it's very natural for a lot of data scientists to be like, we're not ready to do what I'm doing now until we fix it upstream. And like what I'm doing is going to be half baked. It's not going to be a good product because it's garbage in, garbage out. And so I can it's not necessarily as appealing to me. I prefer more like doing the strategy behind that than implementation, and thinking about the problem solving around it more so than the implementation. But it's a very natural thing, I think, to say, oh, there's this other thing that needs to be fixed before I can do good work. I want to work on that, at least within my company or just in general, because it's such a fundamental part of any business infrastructure now.
And I think the other thing that happened is there was an opportunity to come in and be like the main person leading these big transition projects. So for example, my situation, we had kind of a late era Hadoop stack that was showing its age. And suddenly there were a couple of different cloud trial projects that popped up that I got involved with to like try cloud-based data systems. And so you could go from being like part of a big data science team where you were a small fish in a big pool, basically, and suddenly you could be the big fish in the pond, running a big project and just get ahead on all of these technologies, because that transition, it felt almost like a phase transition. Like almost overnight, it was something like, okay, we're kind of done with Hadoop. We need to think about what happens next. How are we going to do that? And so you could go in and learn a lot about cloud technologies and be leading that charge when otherwise you might just be part of it.
Yeah, I mean, you went into that pretty early too, right? And I think you sunk your teeth into it, but you had gotten out of academia too. So
that's I haven't been in this space as long as Joe has, because I've taught for a long time, basically.
But the kids all benefited from Matt there, so it's all good.
Professor Matt.
They all became data scientists.
That's right. They're all becoming data scientists now.
It's a very interesting perspective from a data scientist point of view. You look back, if you're working with an engineering department that isn't focused on data, and you see the software engineers and maybe like architects setting stuff up, and you're like, why would they design it that way if I'm supposed to use it in this other way? And so there's a lot of curiosity as a data scientist to say, hey, how would I design this infrastructure so it would be useful to me as I move forward upstream? And there's that for a lot of people that's just really interesting. Right. And there's a lot of problems, as you guys have illustrated in your book, that you run into. It's this whole new can of worms. And at least for me, I feel like, yes, there's always these new cutting edge models that are coming out. There's always this stuff that's exciting. But data science, in my mind, is relatively like, we know what it is. Right. There's tools that change roughly, but it's not moving as fast. It's not innovating like it was 4 or 5 years ago.
It doesn't seem to be. Yeah.
And I think data engineering, and on the other side of that, like way down the pipeline with like heavy machine learning engineering and AI are, but like this space in the middle is, it's moving, but it's moving at a just different and confusing pace.
Yeah. Seems that way. What's your thoughts on, all the generative AI coming out?
Yeah. Which is pretty interesting. What's your guys' take on that? Like,
I think it's cool. Like, I think, long term, the impact of this is yet to be seen. But I think there's, Matt mentioned, kind of phase changes, right? I think this could potentially be one of them. I feel like also you gotta balance the impact of this over the kind of the medium to long term versus the short term exuberance, which reminds me a lot of Web3, and that issue Francois Chalet had a great tweet storm about the kind of a similar idea, where it's not so much of the technology itself as like complete BS, but people want to throw their money somewhere, and all the Web3 crowds now
an AI crowd,
generative AI, and it's so I think it's a blessing and a curse, like all these types of cycles go, right? I mean, it gets a lot of people interested, but it's still super early too.
I recently released the course that I wish I had had when I was starting out in the data science domain. It's called The Machine Learning Process from A to Z, and I partnered with 365 Data Science to build this. I also worked with my good friend Jeff Lee, who's one of the most impressive data scientists I know, to get all of the implementation correct. This course is special for a couple reasons. So first, it focuses on the machine learning process. So you go from ideation to data collection, to exploratory data analysis, all of the steps to building and implementing a data science project. It's all taken care of for you. We don't focus as much on the algorithms. This is all about getting a project out the door. Next, we've also open sourced all of our code and all of our examples on GitHub and Kaggle. Those are very easily accessible to everyone, including those people who just maybe want to see those and don't want to pay for the full course. In addition to that, we've included all of the resources that we use to build the course, so you're getting multiple different perspectives on every single concept rather than just our singular voice. I view this course as one of the most valuable things that I put into the world, and I'm excited to hear what you think of it. I've included a discount link in the description for the YouTube video, as well as in the descriptions on all the other podcast platforms.
So do these massive models present any type of infrastructure problem? They're dealing, especially in training, with so many parameters. They have so much use. There's data going around everywhere. Is there anything special that they have to do from an infrastructure perspective? Or is it just like this is business as usual compared to some of the use cases that are out there?
I think it's pretty heavy on infrastructure, especially the training part. And so one estimate I saw said that for GPT-3, so not even ChatGPT, they had to spend like $10 million, I think, just on the final training. I think that was and so you had intermediate trainings happening before that. So it's a lot of heavy infrastructure. It's something that probably, unless you're a really big company with a lot of resources, you're going to end up using cloud resources for, because who wants to have that many GPUs just sitting around most of the time not doing anything, unless you're like Google.
Ternary had a really good article about this yesterday, as they always have great articles, best in the biz in that area. But they went through kind of the big tech companies and the impact that these generative AI is going to have on these all the big tech companies, and it'll be interesting. I think everyone seems all the companies are, because the whole thing was about a disruption, right? And so does disruption occur from startups, or does disruption occur from big companies? And sometimes it's the big companies that cause the disruption. I think in this case, this is an example of it where Microsoft funded OpenAI, for example, and a lot of these big companies just have the resources to even make a model like this. Like it's nothing where we can do a GoFundMe and let's make a a trillion parameter model and train it. But I think it's cool. It'll be interesting to see. I think with the effects of also sort of these you have open models and you have proprietary models, and was it Stable Diffusion is going to be in the iPhone, or that's actually in the Core ML now for Apple. So in the open source, so that's going to be interesting to see sort of the impact of just Stable Diffusion and probably other generative models on just being embedded on your phone, and the impacts of that. That's pretty interesting actually. But when I was on my drive here, because I think about just such amazing things, I was thinking about what's really interesting is structured data, which is the stuff that we tend to work on. That really wasn't, as far as I know, a part of these models and the training, right? It's all unstructured data and so forth. So it's my question is, okay, so what's the impact of structured data, tabular data, that rows and columns that we all tend to work in? It's everything except that, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's the thing. These models are really amazing, but I think if you want to look for future progress that's coming, then you look at their limitations, right? So you actually want to look around the edge and see where they have problems and think about those solutions. And so, for example, ChatGPT, as I understand it, it trains on all this data, and it's basically trained to be creative. And that means that often it will know the answer to a question, and so it will give you a response. But it also is trained to BS, and so it will make up very, very convincing answers. And so that's where you hit the edge of its capabilities. And so I think one interesting thing would be to actually create models that have a capability to go research and check things. That may be the big next step, including maybe running SQL queries to ask questions almost like an analyst, right? Can you imagine how revolutionary that would be?
Yeah.
And it's going to take a lot of work to get there. We're going to have to rethink a lot of things, but it might not be that far away either.
Yeah. Well, something at the most basic level that you're looking for in any machine learning model, maybe not an AI generative model, is stability or reliability, right? When you get the same input, you get the same output. Yeah. And ChatGPT does not offer that in any way, shape, or form. And so that's a very interesting thing. What are the implications of that in normal use cases, right?
Well, in Salt Lake City, there was a guy named Kim Peek that used to live here. Did you ever watch Rain Man, the movie?
Yeah.
So Rain Man was basically a movie about a savant, right? Who's also the R word. And so Kim Peek was the guy that movie was based on. He lived in Salt Lake City. I think his brain was fused or some crazy thing. So he's, he's disabled. Like his dad had to basically mind him the entire time, but he would read, I think, like dozens of books a day, because for whatever reason he could read 2 pages at once and just go like this. And he had 99% recall on anything he'd ever read, ever. And so this is what ChatGPT reminds me of in some ways. Is like, in some weird way, it's like the Kim Peek version of human intelligence, where it's just this sort of, I don't know, it's almost sort of an offshoot in a way, right? Whereas Kim Peek will actually give you reliably correct answers. ChatGPT won't, but it's interesting because in some ways, like he memorized Kim Peek. I used to go to the library just to watch him do his thing, because he didn't realize I was there. He was just like reading the phone books is what he'd be doing all day, and memorizing like, all the Smiths in the United States. I'm not kidding.
All the Reese's.
Yeah, it was like 5 of them. But it was crazy watching this. But you kind of fast forward to now, because in the back of my mind I was like, God, I wonder if a computer would ever be able to do that, because this guy's kind of like a human Google, but in a different way. Like he's not coming back with search results; he's coming back with answers, right? And this is actually, I think, a first way of a first glimpse of that now, but in a computer form.
That's a really interesting analogy. And the analogy I've used is that in some ways, these models are almost like a human who has a brain injury, like a selective brain injury, or like a human who has dementia. And so if you're a human who has dementia, you may actually have very good memory of specific types of events in the past, but you like lose certain memory abilities to create new memories. And so, for example, GPT-3, like in a lot of these large language models, they're memorizing all this information during the training process, but they generally don't have contextual memory. So in other words, as we're having this conversation, we can remember what we had for lunch today, and we can remember the conversation we've been having, and we can remember parts of this conversation, but not like 100% photographically. Our brains selectively pick out pieces of information that we need to remember to continue the conversation. And that's where these models tend to be struggling. Now, what I want to do is read a bit more about their strategy for remembering parts of a conversation with ChatGPT and understand what the limitations are. Because again, if you want to advance general purpose artificial intelligence, you need to look at the edges, not the hype and the stuff they can do, but what can't they do? What human abilities do they lack?
So what's the best one to invest in, Matt?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, at the same time, I think it's probably good that it computes differently than a human would, right? That makes it useful to us. If it was just maybe like another human with more human biases, I mean, ChatGPT does have human biases from the data it's trained on. But I think that our ability to bounce off of something that is inherently not rationalizing in the same way we do adds value to the way that we communicate. I mean, there's a famous thing of the first like chess AI, right? Where when an AI is paired with a human high level chess player, they almost uniformly outperform just chess AI in itself. Sure. And if we can keep it in that way, where it's like a shared benefit relationship, I think that there's so much tremendous power. When we're completely deferring to a machine or to these other things, because it does all the thinking for us in a very human way. I think that, we're going to get suboptimal results compared to the paired.
Expect that for sure. Yeah. Listen to a good Econ Talk episode today, Econ Talk, the podcast. And it was about, actually, I can't remember the guest name, but he was writing about how humans have actually done a really good job at emulating machines. Because I think the whole conversation around AI has been about how to make it more human. But he's like, well, think of how much computers have made us like them. So for songs, for example, right, or like YouTube, we're all trying to work towards the algorithm and do things that the machines want us to do. So it's really interesting, the balance, right? Because we're so used to thinking about AI as being like, well, how can this become more human? We're like, well, maybe we're becoming more like machines.
Merge sort my socks, so.
Yeah, I can tell. Yeah.
I mean, I actually wrote an article about this a couple months back in our newsletter, and it was talking about how with social platforms in particular, but other types of platforms, we've actually created a lot of signals on those platforms that are designed for data science. So for example, the Facebook like, or, the Instagram, heart or whatever, those are not there just because they're appealing to humans. They're there because those are super nice labels for data scientists. And you see this phenomenon of people, it's kind of like the pigeon rain dance, where they're conforming to these machine signals because they want to get more attention.
Yep. Yeah, it'll be interesting, but and of course, there's this issue of like student cheating using GPT, which I think is a given. But the calculators were exactly the same thing back in the day, and same with search engines. So it's to me, I'm just like, bring it on. It's like, at the end of the day, what makes humans human is because of the things that make us human: creativity and all these things, right? And of course, some people will say, well, yeah, but computers will eventually do all that. But I don't know. Maybe it will, maybe it won't.
Yeah. I saw an interesting clip from Alex Hormozy. So he's a content creator, but he was saying, he's talking about ChatGPT, and he's like, okay, I could type into ChatGPT to create this code to do this thing, right? But he doesn't know how to implement it. He doesn't know how to debug it. He doesn't know what, if the code is incomplete or if you need to make adjustments. So you need a software engineer, a coder to do that. So ChatGPT is still pretty much only useful for that use case for people that have the domain knowledge to begin with.
Yeah.
And so it makes their job significantly easier, but it doesn't necessarily open it up to the everyman. Or you still need that domain knowledge, or at least some substance of it.
Well, it's going to give a lot of wrong answers, correct? In a correct way, right?
Or an assertive way, right? Like a very confident way.
But I wrote in LinkedIn about this too, about a month ago or maybe more. But it was like, I felt like, okay, so SEO, sprung up to sort of like gamify search engine results. I think you're going to see the same thing with generative AI results. It's like, just whether it's factual or not, right? And that's a huge problem, actually.
Well, that's terrifying.
Right, it's going to happen. I bet it's already. I mean, if I were in content, or had an agenda, I would be gaming every single thing right now.
So the next time ChatGPT just says nice things about Microsoft constantly.
It's nothing but nice things about Microsoft, great things about Elon. It's not like Tay. Remember Tay back in 2017? That thing was amazing.
No, but it's still like that though. They found all these ways of bypassing the controls on it, right? Like you can wrap your like horrible request in a function, and it will return a bunch of terrible stuff. Like you can get it to give you stuff from the Anarchist Cookbook about how to make Molotov cocktails. Or you can get it to say like horrible racist stuff just by there are various tricks allegedly. I mean, but these do. I agree with you, Joe. It's like the next iteration of like, I'll call it prosthetic technology, where it just like enhances humans. But there are also these sort of scary implications about stuff it can do already.
Well, scary implications because humans do scary things.
Well, right, So how are humans going to use this?
No, it's gonna make the world a better place for sure. No, I'm like every time I see stuff like this and more advances, I'm just like, gosh, I got a cabin in Wyoming. Maybe I'll just go live there for a while. So I'm just like, peace out. You guys can deal with this.
Yeah, can I come?
Sure. It's a nice place.
Yeah. Well, changing gears from cutting edge technology to
fax machines,
one of the oldest technologies, which is books. I'm interested in, so I recently made a couple courses, and we use ChatGPT towards the end for some of the the data examples, which is a really good use case, right? Like creating like fabricated data for a use case. We used it for like doing summaries of articles that we wanted to talk about, things along those lines. And we found it really useful. Probably saved us, hours.
Yeah.
Would you have written the book differently if you had access to a ChatGPT?
Not at all. And in fact, I'm glad that stuff like this exists because it means less competition, I would say. A book like ours, you couldn't do it with ChatGPT, I don't think. It would be like, how would that work?
I imagine it would generate some stuff that's correct, and it would generate some stuff that's total BS.
Then you have to go back through and fix it.
Well, that's just it.
So that's what we did. We basically looked through.
Right?
Like,
you want BS, like you want it to be made up, not connected to real humans.
It's like having a ghostwriter, right? But a ghostwriter, like a
really bad ghostwriter who check
drinks
sources.
Is drunk and
drunk,
like
super smart, and they can make stuff up like nobody's business.
So that's like a lot of people.
That'd be kind of fun though, to just have ChatGPT write a book and see what it produces.
Well, so I thought about this. Actually, I have a note on my phone because one thing I want to do. So on Amazon, so we wrote our book. It's doing really well. You want to know the genre of books it does like really, really well? Like, trashy romance novels.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Right. So like I was chatting with Carly about this when we were having dinner a few weeks ago. I was like, if you want to write a book, you should write books like this. Like there's this whole series of like billionaire books and like sleeping with the boss books and stuff. And it's like these are trash, but the number of reviews are like tens of thousands of reviews in these things. I'm like, okay, somebody's making a lot of money off these books. And I was like, I can't stand to write this. ChatGBT would be perfect for this kind of stuff.
Probably.
Just give me a theme, like billionaire, getting Me Too'd, that kind of stuff. And some romance triangle or something like that. And then it would just write it, and then you just put it on Amazon and Kindle Direct Publishing and make a lot of money. Like, to me, that's,
I'm in.
And don't steal my idea, audience.
Where do I
mine.
sign up?
No, but it's just these kinds of things. I would be like, that's the kind of book I'd say where it's like a formulaic type of a book. Like that could be a candidate for an AI to write it.
How far away do you think we are from that? I mean, maybe you could get something today. But
honestly, I don't think that far. So
yeah,
one of the guests I had on a couple weeks ago, they're comedians, socially inept. The guy Austin Nasso, he had ChatGPT write like a skit for him for his Instagram TikTok reels about, I think it was like, he did a couple about like Shrek, a couple about like two guys that were talking about a skit that ChatGPT wrote, and it was good. It was legitimately funny. It was what you would expect from a skit on TikTok or something along those lines.
Yeah,
and it was like it got nuanced humor. I mean, it was pretty wild. I mean, the problem is you have to regenerate a couple times to get something that's good.
Yeah.
But regenerating and reading is a lot easier than writing.
For sure. But writing is thinking, right? And so that's kind of I think that what we discovered with our book is like there's this, the amount of work you'd have to do to write a book like that and think through the subtleties of it is like, that's where I think it's going to be really hard, at least for the time being, for these types of technologies to replace or even augment certain things. It all depends what you're trying to do, though, in the thought process. Like, what I also concerned with too is what it's going to do is you're going to have this like reversion to the mean of just like really mediocre ideas in writing, because it's based just upon the corpus of knowledge that it's accumulated. And
I think that's where content's going. Is you're going to have massive volume and very like middling content, and the way to differentiate is going to be to have really high quality content and also high volume.
But we have such high standards anyway. It's like I don't know that we'd ever like.
I mean, you guys are on my podcast, so I don't know how high my standard. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, do you have any Miller Lite here?
Miller High Life. That's
champagne of beers.
Yeah, it's good stuff. No, but I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the concern I have really is that just the quality of the content's going to go to basically it's a race to the bottom in this case, because everything will be the same. It kind of is now, again, back to the point of everyone trying to feed the algorithm and make sure the algorithm's happy. Like that's, so what you see is on YouTube, for example, is like a lot of the content looks the same. There's a reason for that, right? And so, but what makes it hard is when you actually have like a novel idea that needs to stand out or something interesting. Like how does it stand out in that case?
That is my biggest gripe about content right now.
Yeah.
Is that every time on YouTube, for example, that I try to take a risk, or I make a video that I think is fundamentally different or creative or out there, it never does well in the algorithm because it's fundamentally different than my other content. And it's like the best way to get a video that is popular is to find someone else's video that was really popular, use a similar name, similar thumbnail, and innovate on that, right? And like make some changes, make it maybe more watchable, look at what the other person did and improve upon it. And to me, that's not fun. It's not motivating to make that type of content. I would, but also you're, like if you're looking at it like a business, you're like, oh, I would like to grow. I'd like to have more reach. I'd like to do these things. I think, at least for me, I feel like what I'm saying on these platforms and these conversations are valuable and interesting to people. And so it's like this trade-off where do I want to grow or do I want to make the content that I feel like is the most interesting? And to be honest, I've probably stunted my growth a lot because I very seldomly make the content that I feel like would get the most views because it's just not interesting to me. It's not.
Yeah.
There's also this shift to short form, which has been happening for years with Twitter now, with like the whole TikTok explosion during COVID. And that's also concerning, right? Because no one becomes a data engineer or a data scientist just by watching 10 to 15
Well, that's how I
videos.
became one. So speak for yourself, dude.
Well, I mean, even YouTube is shifting this way with shorts, right?
Shorts, yeah. And so for me, the way I look at it is all of my short form content, I just wanted to drive to my long form content. I feel like
that makes sense.
Like morally, that's the best. I'm not going to try and tell an entire story in less than a minute, because inevitably there is a lack of nuance, and also that just leaves you open to getting accosted online because like, you didn't say this, you didn't say that, and like you can't, right?
Right.
So I've focused a lot on clipping up the podcast, clipping up, like trimming my normal videos into the distilled points and pointing back to the full thing. But attention span is just getting shorter, and it's
way shorter.
Concerning for learning.
Yeah.
Well, it means less competition, though. I mean, it depends on how you look at it, right? Like if you can consume long form content and like understand the big ideas. I mean, for me, I'm stoked. My kids are like gonna do great in life. They read books and like they think independently, and I'm like, just get all your friends and all their friends just like watch a lot of TikTok and everything and just like rot their minds. This is great. Yeah. You know, at the same time, my kid watches a lot of Mr. Beast, which I think, and he looks up to Mr. Beast. Like that's his idol. Like that's who he wants to be. He's like, I want to be an influencer too.
I mean, Mr. Beast is one of the hardest working people probably on the planet.
Oh, right? For sure. Yeah. Mad props to him. Right. And he started doing this stuff back when he was 11 years old. You know, my phone is all kinds of videos of my kids like stealing it. And they're like, yeah, some of you dropping some merch like tomorrow, you know, so come check it out on my page.
I'll buy it.
NFT game.
No, they make t-shirts, you know, but that's the world they grow up in. I mean, you want to see what, like, you know, my oldest kid, Milo, he's 12. He literally makes video games all day. That's like, he writes video games. That's all he does. And then draws. Yeah. That's it.
It's fascinating how many kids I hear are interested in making video games. That is probably going to be one of the next really big professions. Is either YouTuber or video game creator.
Probably both.
Yeah,
right.
You can do both. Yeah,
yeah. It's like, I mean, Mr. Beast. I mean, a lot of his videos are him playing Minecraft and other stuff. I mean, it's cool. It's cool to see. But it's interesting too because you know Marshall McLuhan, you know, had the old quote, "The medium is the message," right? And so it's, you know, what that means is what you have to say depends on the way and the method that you're using to say it. Short form videos, like you have a time cap on it, right? And so it is what it is, and it has to have visual elements too. It's like, you know, it's not a book, and these are different things. I don't know. I tend to be more of a long form person though, right? Like I'm writing another book right now, and that's like, it's just a different. The approach is just way different than if you would ever try and make a short video. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of paradoxical what tech has done to the content space, because on the one hand, there's never been a better time to consume long form content or produce long form content. Like you can create an hour just amazing video and just drop it on YouTube, and millions or a billion people have access to it, and you can get 100,000 views very easily if it's something that interests people. But we also have so many short form distractions that are pulling people away from that opportunity.
Yeah. I think I think there's actually a lot of benefits to short form content. Mm-hmm. So one thing I've noticed about long form content is the incentive is to keep the viewer watching longer. Mm-hmm. So that makes for not effective communication. Essentially, if you make a video and you just tell everyone all of the valuable information up front, they won't watch an entire video because they know what to expect. So you have to do all these different things to delay gratification, to have a payout at the end, to do it. And short form, you can kind of give everything up. You still want people to watch the whole thing, but you can be a little bit more direct. And that was the most interesting thing for me. I mean, in any business scenario, you want to be very clear upfront with why you're here. Like you want to reduce the length of any conversation, any communication, because that's how you're conveying value. You're saving people time. But in content, it is the polar opposite. And I personally I do it because I like storytelling, right? I think that there's something interesting about that. And if I make it valuable and interesting the whole way, then fine. But it directly conflicts with how information in theory should be conveyed.
Yeah. Did you watch Avatar 2?
Not yet, no.
Holy crap. Was it 3 hours and 12 minutes?
Yeah. It's that long?
Which was, it was that long too. So I took my kids to it. So you can imagine like kids who are used to watching short
I would have had to pee like 5 times.
This goddamn movie. It was like, I sat there and I was like, do I have to be here? I can't leave. It was that was long. And it's one of those things where I was like, okay, and the TLDR of it should be like 30 minutes. Like, but again, it's like a high grossing movie. So it's interesting that like people will sit through a movie that's over 3 hours long with a bunch of blue people, aliens, sorry. And they're entertained by that. Cause it shocked me because I was sitting around theaters like, who here has the attention span for this right now?
Yeah.
Did y'all like pop a bunch of like Adderall before you came in here?
Marvel
like,
movies are super long as well, right?
Yeah,
It's
they're long too. But it's all explosions.
It's an Avatar. I haven't seen Avatar 2. I assume there are a lot of explosions.
There's beautiful greenery and stuff.
Okay.
This one takes place in the ocean. It's slightly, So, but I was just sitting there like, wow. I mean, I don't know what people are on right now to watch this movie, but it must be pretty good stuff.
This is such a guilty admission, but there's a lot of YouTube channels that'll summarize a film in like 10 minutes and use all the like just tell the story.
Yeah.
And I'll sometimes just go down rabbit hole after rabbit hole because I very rarely watch movies, TV anymore. And like something I'm like, I kind of want to know what happens, or I just like want to know the gist of what this is. Because I don't really know why I watch movies anymore, right? It's like, what am I hoping to get at? Am I hoping to be entertained for that time period, or do I want to just absorb the story and be like, oh, that's interesting? Like what's the twist? Like, what is this? And unfortunately, that like does it for me a good amount of the time. Just watching a 10-minute video.
Summary. Oh, speaking of summaries in books, so this is really interesting. So right as our book came out, there was this odd summary of Fundamentals of Data Engineering book that also came out. Think about that. I was like, so you don't even, how did they get the book, first of all? And second, I downloaded a sample on my Kindle. There's no way I'm buying this goddamn thing, but I get the sample and I'm like, what wrote this? Not who, but like what wrote this book? Yeah. Because it didn't seem to fit anything at all, obviously of our book, but even of data engineering. It was just a hodgepodge of just random tech stuff. And so I looked at the publisher though, and I looked at the other books, and what was even stranger, it was like, oh geez, was Alex Jones's book. It was The Great Reset was also one of the summaries that this company had done. So it's a bunch of these like fringe right wing books, and then our book.
I thought, I'm glad you
check your audience, Joe.
What's that?
Check your audience.
Well, I mean, the book's clearly for the MAGA crowd for sure, and it's short, because it's hard to read. So, no, but it was the most bizarre thing because I started reading through this. Like, a human didn't write this book. Yeah, this is a machine or a very ill-informed person. Or like a book sweatshop like wrote this book, but there's no way.
It's a race to the bottom.
It's a race. It's the dark side of long tail, right? It's like these companies can just generate all this garbage and sell a few of each on Kindle and make money doing that.
Yeah, like the books I'm going to be writing. The romance novels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, even little things like I got the other day. I was in a rush. I had to get a hotel for one of my business travel trips, and I go to what I thought was the hotel website. It had the hotel name and then like .reservations.com. And it was like the reservation intermediary. But the first 5 search results were not the hotel's website. So I'm not going to scroll down further than that. I assumed it was the website. I was like, oh, it's a little weird that that it's not like its own website. Maybe they just use a third party. It wasn't like a Marriott or anything. It was a boutique hotel. And then the transaction costs, I wasn't paying attention. I was using my company credit card. It's like,
don't tell Ken's boss. It's fine.
Yeah, it's like $100 extra, and but I wasn't thinking about it. I was in a hurry. But it's like these little things where these companies that create no value, are able to fleece you out of a couple bucks here and there, and that's enough to sustain their business. Think about how many people are booking hotels on non-mainstream hotels, right? Think about, I think I'm a fairly smart guy. I'm fairly observant, and I got like how.
Well, and you travel a lot, right? So you know what you're looking for, and you still got taken by this thing. Like, it also raises fundamental questions about Google's business model, because there's been a lot of chatter about ChatGPT and how it might affect them. But it's like, when you go to Google, this supposedly trusted source of information, and that's what they give
the
you.
The first 3 or 4 were ads. And I was like, oh.
And it's like garbage, low quality ads that they make money off of, but like they're giving you bad information for pay, which goes against what supposedly Google is all about.
Well, how do you think you would advertise on ChatGPT, what would that look like? You know, is that a viable
I guess
business
we'll
model
find
for
out
them?
with Bing, right?
Oh yeah, they are
Yeah.
using it. I forgot they're integrating.
Yeah.
Well, and some people are saying that's just a stunt because you
Probably.
can see all these examples where ChatGPT would fall on its face in a way that would generate a scandal. But my other thought is, well, maybe you take ChatGPT and you sort of create the human analogy is executive functions, right? Like you actually create another model that checks its work and says, oh, this is white supremacist stuff you're spouting.
Or we
Go
just let chaos happen.
or you just let chaos happen.
I like this idea. Let's just go that way. It's going to happen anyway. So it happened on social media already,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we let chaos
And
happen
YouTube too. I mean,
we let chaos happen. And the funny thing is with social media, especially, like everyone is complicit in it. Every time you post, it's like you're gaming the algorithm, and it's just what do you think is going to happen? I mean, this is just the next evolution of it, where now you just have a thing that's trained on everything you say. So
Yeah.
But here's my question. I mean, it's 2023 now. I almost said 2022. It's 2023 now. And these platforms are still relying heavily on signals like likes, right? Which are really, really dumb labels. So from your perspective of data science, like what comes next? How do we finally get better where we're just it's not this like pure attention stimulus that we're going after, that we're trying to look for more subtle signals? Is it these large language models that help us to do that, or what?
I mean, I think the answer is maybe better models, but definitely better data.
Yeah.
I'm most deeply steeped in YouTube.
Yeah.
And YouTube, you have comments. And so if you can evaluate comments as well as likes, and YouTube uses, in theory, a more objective metric, which is watch time.
yeah.
And so watch time of YouTube videos, that's essentially what everything is based off. If you click it and if you watch it. So those are, again, these fairly objective measures of interest. You can also get more nuanced at the individual data collection. So if Joe never likes videos, but he likes one of my videos, that might mean something more than the average like, right? Or if he comments on a video and it has positive sentiment, and he almost never comments, but he watches.
I did that with our podcast show. Yeah.
but
It's like, this is the best show I've ever seen, Ken. Like it.
Exactly. So I think that there's nuance in that way, where it's not necessarily more data about the individual video, but it's more data about the people interacting with it that can drive.
They're going to be so confused by mine because my kids also use my account.
Well, even they accidentally use our company account sometimes. And so there are all these like MMA videos on there. Just random.
No,
that's me watching them. But yeah, like no, my kid's done that before, where I think he was learning to like dig a pond or something, and then it was like all these pond videos, and yeah, YouTube's got to look at just some accounts, parents' accounts, where it's like, yeah, I don't know. Hopefully they're figuring out that
I would imagine
that model,
sure,
because it's all over the place, stand-up comedy for me, and then like Mr. Beast for my kids, and
super obscene stand-up comedy, and then Mr. Beast for your kids.
I wonder what just like classification
cool
they
kid.
put you into.
What's that?
I wonder what like you'd be classified as. I'm sure they use some sort of
Probably on a
customer
watch list,
segmentation.
actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what happened.
Just a man-child.
That's the list. That's the categorization.
Oh my goodness.
So
you guys have obviously published this book. You're both kind of on new chapters of your career as well.
Yeah.
I'm interested to hear more about that. What are you looking forward to? What is changing in your life?
I think it's interesting. I mean, Ternary is a company that Matt and I started, a while ago, and it's, I think we're just ready for new stuff, frankly. And so, it's the book, I think, opened up a lot of new opportunities for us. And so, and consulting is one of these things, which Ternary is a consulting company, or a data engineering consulting company. And as much as we all love consulting, I'm joking, it's fun once in a while, but I feel like, for me personally, it just felt like a grind after a while. And, it's you're always having to chase the next deal, right? And we're in a position now where, I don't know, at least for me, I'm just over it. And so I'm working on a new book right now on data modeling and, a bunch of other stuff, and just giving talks and, advising here and there for people that I like. But it really just dialed things back for the most part. I think just staying a lot more focused on things that I really want to work on. But I don't know about you.
I'm kind of in the well. I mean, I'm still figuring it out at the moment, which I'll acknowledge that I'm in a really privileged position to be able to do that. Just to be able to sit back for a bit and think about where I want to be going next. But
you'll sip your cortados in the morning.
Gosh,
right. What will I do today? Oh,
but just kind of wrapping up some existing projects and then figuring out. Yeah, I think I want to keep like moving into the tech training space. I think there's still a huge opportunity there. The reality is we're probably headed for some economic shifts. We've already seen those in 2022, and I think a lot of people from many walks of life will be looking to like improve or change their professional situation, and so it's a privilege to be in a position to help them to do that. And so probably whatever comes next will have something to do with that, just like Joe's book. And yeah.
Well, so how do you approach like philosophically making a pivot in the middle of your career?
And this is not the only pivot.
Yeah, of course.
I was a college professor for a long time before I decided to move away from that. That's a good question.
I think my thought is that something that you're scared of? Is it something you're excited about? Is it something that you don't feel either way about, but it's there's an objective view that you have on it? I think that a lot of the times when we go through these things, we have feelings that we give to them, and they're not always grounded in reality. Sometimes they are. I mean, I would like to think that in my decision making, I'm pretty objective, but there's also things like I didn't realize. I was like, wow, I finished that talk and like I didn't realize how much it was stressing me out. I didn't realize it was impacting me in the ways that it was.
For me, it feels like it's a new chapter. But I'm used to pivots as well. For me, it's just like cool, another one. Let's do this, right? So I'm excited. Like I feel like 2022 was an awesome year, and this year's shaping up to be even better. I'm not a person that sits back and like wallows in regret or self-pity or anything. It's just kind of like move on, do something else. It's just how it is. Like I think reinvention is one of these things I personally think is awesome. You have a chance to start over and do something new. I think for where I am in my career, it's like definitely want to innovate and push ideas forward. And I think that's where I feel like can contribute a lot, to both the field and to myself, and and that inspires my kids too. They look at that and like, that's pretty cool. Like you're not like every dad out there, you're different, and so that's cool, to get that feedback from them. And
have you always been that way?
Yeah, I've always been that way. I don't think I've ever like there's been nothing in my career where it's ever been following the prescribed path, and I think that's, I don't know. To me, that it would be weirder if I actually did do what I guess everyone expected me to do, and so that would be more of the weird thing. So this just feels natural, actually.
Yeah.
So
I feel like that's very different for you, Matt, where you followed a very prescribed path in education, and then you sort of branched away from that.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So academia is very interesting because there's this curious social capital problem that happens. And that's because you're interacting with people who are very good at their jobs, like these professors who are, have done amazing research and such, but actually don't know that much about the job market and potential job opportunities. And so as I was like going through my PhD and then postdocs and things, the advice I generally got from people in math is like, well, you can either go teach somewhere, or you can maybe go join the NSA, the National Security Agency, which is what mathematicians tended to do. And as I talked to more people, I discovered there are all kinds of potential career opportunities out there.
You can be a waiter.
Yeah, exactly. Go into acting. I mean, who knows? But I think the reality is that for all of us, it's very beneficial. Like as we get our formal education, you gain a lot of social capital of a certain narrow type. But it's very, very useful to get out of that circle and meet a lot of people doing different things that you might be interested in, to learn about what's out there.
Well, didn't you say too, it was kind of a political universities or academia is very political. I think you had the saying once. I think it's like the fights are
so vicious because the stakes are so low.
Yeah,
it's this whole like sort of big fish in a small pond phenomenon where you're like fighting over just a small, fighting over small amounts of credit and fighting over department.
Sounds like LinkedIn.
In some ways it is. I mean, I think if you get focused on the wrong things, even in the influencer sphere, you can kind of end up in the same situation where people are stepping on each other instead of finding their own territory to operate in.
Yeah. You know, I find that more and more on LinkedIn. So as you guys know, I've talked about, I'm posting significantly more on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Good post, especially what you did about us today. For free books. It's great. Thank you.
Well, I mean, honestly, on LinkedIn, I'm just sharing my stream of consciousness. It's just things I think about. It's like, okay, it helps me to sort of center every day with like, I feel like it's not like I'm looking to say anything profound ever really, but it's like, okay, I should organize my thoughts in a way that they're cohesive. And I'd like to try to find something that's either motivating, insightful, whatever it might be each day. And without fail, you know, there's people that, you know, see things differently and let me know. And I think that that's okay. I think that I actually definitely value the feedback, but I always feel like people that are posting these things, they want to start a fight on the internet. Yeah. And I just don't, I don't understand.
Well, you have nothing to gain from that either. It's kind of like, you know, you're Ken G and it's like, you don't need to really punch down, so to speak. Not, you know,
it's like winning a bar fight at like a dive bar. It's like no one cares. It's not the MMA. Right?
But I'm 4-0. So
yeah, in the streets, you should see my record. It's crazy. You know, I have to register my hands. They're so dangerous. So no, it's absolutely right. I mean, you know, I'm writing this book on data modeling right now, and there's some crazy nutbags in that nut jobs in that field, man. Jeez. You know, I'm making a lot of friends in this business for sure. But, you know, I just saw a comment, you know, even today when we were at lunch, and some guy's like, do you realize, like, you know, math and logic have been around for thousands of years? And I just wrote back like, God, I thought they were brand new. I had no idea. Thanks for your insight. And I was like, I have a math degree. What, seriously, like what? Like, and I studied logic for a long time. I think I know how this stuff works. And yes, I am familiar with the history. But it's like just these pedantic arguments on there. I mean, people just want to seem smart. I just post dumb stuff, so it's like I don't really set the bar too high, but it's like it is what it is. I mean, you get a place like that too where it's like, I think it's kind of like academia in the sense, and that quote you had about kind of, you know, the fights are so vicious because the stakes are so low. It's the same thing on LinkedIn where it's a professional space, and so, you know, there's a sense of decorum, but at the same time I do notice like petty, you know, replies and arguments and stuff. I generally don't engage with this stuff anymore, except when some dumbass like puts something like that on there, and I'm like, yeah, you set yourself up for, you know, a smart ass reply.
Well, and it's funny because I think the algorithms encourage this, right? Like the algorithms everywhere are just designed to encourage engagement, and often that's negative engagement. And so you have these people like doom scrolling through LinkedIn, just spoiling for a fight. And LinkedIn recognizes this, and so keeps feeding them stuff that is going to trigger them in various ways.
Oh, and I just block them after a bit. You know, like I am pretty merciless. It's like if you cross the boundaries and like you start attacking, or if you're just like relentlessly pedantic and just wasting everybody's time, like I don't have time to respond to you. I don't have time to care or even look at your stupid posts. So,
well, you know, I don't understand what the return on investment is, right? I post on LinkedIn with a very clear purpose. Right. I was telling you guys before, my LinkedIn posts this year are because I'm testing if content is interesting to people. I'm writing things that I am interested in, thoughts that I have that I think other people would be interested in. You know, sort of like an A/B test to see, hey, if other people are interested in this, I'll make more content around that. That to me is inherently valuable to me. But, you know, when people are less than friendly, what is the return on investment for them, right? You know, if they're basically a contrarian, you're posting on a topic that a lot of other people are agreeing on, so it's not like you're going to get more followers. It's not like you're going to get more well known. You're just going to be like, you're just going to be that contrarian viewpoint that is arguing, right? I'm not sure I understand the end goal or why people are doing it. And I guess the world isn't rational, right?
No, but they think they're rational though, right? I mean, in their activity. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't do it. It's like this makes for where I am at this time of the day, at this point in my life, at this time, I have to respond to Ken G's post like this, right? Like that's the rationalization. Like of all the things I could be doing, this is my optimal outcome in life right now. It's weird, you know. I don't understand it. I tend to be very polite on there, except when I'm not. You know? But But yeah, no, there's people I've seen who go on there and they just pick fights with everybody, right? I remember one post they called me out in it and a bunch of my friends, and I was just like, fine, you don't get the privilege of including me in your post anymore. Block, done. So, and that's how I deal with that. I just don't have enough. I got a lot of things on my mind, and last thing I need to be doing is thinking about some nimwad, just has a vendetta. It's like, who cares?
But it's kind of, again, it's the dark side of, I think social media, for all of our complaints about it, does have a lot of really positive impact on our lives, but there's a dark side to it too. And that is that as a side effect of these data science algorithms sort of looking for engagement, we figured out how to emotionally trigger people to get them to engage more.
Well, I mean, the most popular content on YouTube that is not Mr. Beast videos or just
Minecraft videos
or Minecraft videos are criticizing people. I mean, the biggest one right now that I've been all over, and it seems like it's coming to an end, was Logan Paul at this crypto scam.
Oh yeah.
And there's this CoffeeZilla did this. Oh my god, yeah. I mean,
what's the latest on that? I saw the whole takedown of it, basically.
So basically, Logan Paul responded terribly, and then he responded again being like, oops, I messed up. And then we're waiting to see what happens after that.
But this is like criminal level actions, basically a fraud. And yet somehow people on social media have been immune to prosecution for this kind of stuff so far, except for a handful of cases around crypto.
I was just going to do a boxing match and just make some money and pay it off. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean,
go find some guy on the street and beat him up for like $100
I would love to do a YouTube Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or boxing match. That would be.
I'd box Logan Paul for sure.
I would probably have brain damage. He's quite large compared to me.
That's fine.
Yeah, I can't. I need my brain. That's all I've had. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's interesting, and it's interesting too. Just all the different areas of social media too, and all the different things that different genres people are into, like the Logan Pauls, and then. Again, on LinkedIn, I don't really see any equivalent of that. There's not like the Logan Paul scandal on LinkedIn. What's that?
The Kenji's on LinkedIn.
Yeah, Kenji's on there, man.
Have you ever checked out the best of LinkedIn on Instagram?
On Instagram, no. I've checked out LinkedIn Lunatics on Reddit.
Okay, that one's good.
Check out the best of LinkedIn.
I see Ben Taylor on there all the time.
Oh, Ben's on there. Yeah, it's fun. But I think he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that outside looking in, Ben comes off as he's posturing. He's trying to do this. Mm-hmm. And if you knew him, you'd be like, he's literally just being himself.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's all the stuff he's thinking. And he, Ben is very authentic.
Yeah.
And
he's a dear friend.
Yeah. But that's why it's funny is social media, you don't know. It's like reading a text versus getting a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
There are no facial expressions.
Yeah. On a text, you're like, oh my God, is my girlfriend mad at me?
Yeah.
And then you talk on the phone and you're like, oh, she
and then you see them in person. It's a whole different level of emotional
engagement. But there's a certain formula to getting engagement on LinkedIn, though. If you look at the LinkedIn Lunatics, it's actually a really good way to look at the formula, right? What is it called? The hashtag Made Up Kid Monday, right? So it's like, I'm going to make a story about my kid. Like, my kid, she asked, how can I be CEO? And I'm only 5 years old. And
I made a Databricks logo and that was
right. No, you didn't.
I did. I thought it would be really interesting to see what ChatGPT would make as a viral LinkedIn post, and I did a couple of those. Pretty interesting.
Was it pretty good?
It was okay. It was a list so I did 5 different generations, and I was like, what does this put out? And it's interesting inferentially, right? So a lot of them had the same formula, whereas 5 tips for XYZ. And I've experimented with that formula before. That works pretty well with YouTube titles and content like that. But I think that's a fascinating learning from a model like that, where you can look at the formula it uses rather than the content that it uses. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that to me is very interesting.
Well, it is interesting because right now, we're in some, influencer groups and whatnot. And it's interesting seeing how everyone's trying to game the content. And they're looking at the big influencers, the people with millions of followers on LinkedIn, and saying, okay, so if this person's sharing a SQL cheat sheet, then I should be doing that too, right? And so it gets a bit wacky that way. I could never bring myself to publish a SQL cheat sheet, but that's me. So
I just realized that there is a different spin to that, where iteratively content can get better if everyone's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I'd never looked at it that way before. It's like, oh, they're making a SQL cheat sheet, but I can make the SQL cheat sheet a little bit better.
Yeah.
And so the end user, in some sense, does get benefit, but they also have 150 different SQL cheat sheets that nobody knows, varying quality or whatever it might be. And it's a very it's interesting to think about.
Well, I think the thing to do is to look for the gaps, right? Like look at the SQL cheat sheet and say, okay, this inspired a lot of people actually to get better at SQL. That's great. Yeah. But what is missing? Like, what do people need to know that they don't know, based on conversations, based on content, based on consulting, and then try to make that thing and get it to go viral so you can help a lot of people.
Yeah, we were talking about that yesterday for a course we're working on.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It was like, did we make the book kind of based on the core?
Or like we already have.
Do we make the course based on the book,
yeah.
or like what's it take? And we're like, probably not that angle. It's like,
Yeah.
if you want to do the book, go get the book. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's there. So yeah, how do you make it different, right? Like that's part of the art.
So I would argue, though, in that circumstance, difference is the medium, and the medium can be the only differentiator you need sometimes. Like some people, it's like, I'm not gonna read a book, I'll watch a course on video.
Yeah,
that's true.
But
we've had a lot of people ask for an audiobook.
Yeah.
So Riley, you should get on that.
That's an interesting thing.
Audio.
I mean, I think audio. I mean, it's
Martin
so
Clemens'
obvious.
book is an audiobook.
It's his best-selling audiobook too, right?
Yeah,
So it
it's
does
crazy.
amazingly well on
No,
Audible.
it's like Martin Clemens' book's like what 500 something pages, and it's an audiobook.
Yeah,
I'm a big visual guy with like diagrams, looking at code and that type of stuff. I would have an aneurysm trying to listen.
Well,
to
here's
that.
my admission though. I have this habit of just like listening to YouTube videos because just like you, I don't like to sit down and watch things because that means I'm wasting time. But I'll just like turn on YouTube videos and listen to them when I'm like washing dishes or whatever. And you don't learn everything that way, but you pick up a lot of stuff. And I think there are opportunities for content creators to figure out actually how to optimize to these different media. And so like videos where you really make it visually interesting and you have good code examples, but also audio where you can talk through problems where maybe they can go back and look it up later.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I've done with the podcast.
Yeah,
This is the idea is that I would like to have content that people can consume in whatever they're doing. I mean, will they actually do it? Am I that interesting? No. But they have the option to.
Right. Sick.
Yeah.
Yeah, how do we make it interesting enough so people want to listen while they're running? Even because it's time that we can all be using for
get David Goggins to narrate it. I know he didn't even narrate his own audiobook, but I would listen to any audiobook that he.
It'd be motivating. Yeah. Of Jocko Willink.
Jocko would be good.
I like his podcast a lot. Like it's no ads, as far as I can tell.
So if we did like Colin Firth narrating it, could you kind of cross over with like the tech/romance novel market? Would that work?
Maybe. That would be
tech/romance novel market.
Make like a data romance novel.
It would probably do really well. I mean,
I read a fiction book. It was called I think it was called Upgrade. It was about this guy who was in this not post-apocalyptic, but in this alternative future where gene editing was illegalized and all professors associated were like incarcerated or working for the government now, and his mother was this like brilliant scientist that basically like murdered half the world. And it was fiction, but they talked a lot, or at least a reasonable amount, about like databases and that type of stuff. And the book was very good, but his knowledge of SQL was and like how databases worked was not good. So there was like about 2 pages where I was like, what are you doing, dude? I almost emailed him and be like, if you need like a basic tech consultant or revision for an next book, let me know. But overall, the book and his knowledge of technology and like CRISPR and the actual gene editing stuff was solid, but the technology was, I don't know where I was going with that, but
you got to get on SQL Lemur now.
Data Lemur.
Yeah.
How about like a novelist sequel to a cheat sheet? Maybe that's the thing that you should.
That's a new thing you could offer there, Ken. It's like kind of due diligence for your novel, for the tech and the data science part.
I mean, one of the coolest projects I've ever worked on was that Unlock campaign for Z by HP. I mean, they essentially made a movie, and I got to consult on would data scientists actually say this? Would this be? I built all with Hunter Kempf the data problems for it, and so like these are semi-real problems that data scientists would solve or would help them get to their end goal. We actually had them nix the original script because it was just so outlandish that it couldn't possibly work. Right. So
you got to give me an example now.
So it was outlandish in the sense that the main character, I think there was a murder or something, and the main character got called in by the CIA or one of the bureaus to help with the case because their data science skills. And I was like, in what reality would that happen? There's no way they would get the classification.
Last week actually. So.
but the idea is that there's no way they'd give a civilian access to this level of data and information on the public or whatever it might be. And like that to me is, I don't know a data scientist listening to that wouldn't be like, this is completely outlandish.
Would they be in front of a screen where like the screen just keeps the characters keep moving the whole time
Matrix,
too?
Basically.
Yeah. Because I mean, that's when you're hacking.
We got rid of all of those screens, fortunately.
Okay.
It's like real code on the screen.
Although, the other thing that's funny too is when you look at like learn data science, and then you look at the code that they have on the screen, it's like CSS or something.
CSS, yeah. It's like SQL.
No, it's no. I remember looking. I was like, that's a div tag from like an HTML.
Yeah.
Maybe they were scraping the web.
Oh, good point. Yeah. That's actually true. It's
very unlikely.
No. I mean, hacking skills. No, it's fun though. I think it's getting better at least. I mean, I grew up in the '80s with movies like war games and stuff, and it's just like completely outlandish to begin with. Although I think
is that less outlandish?
But
now,
so
though?
it's about the audience though, right?
Yeah.
So if the core audience that this film was for data analysts, data scientists, people who practice. That's who they want it for. Do I necessarily think that was the best audience for a film like that? No, I think a broader audience with maybe lighter detail and data would have been practical. Do I think it? I think it was still a success. But if that's your specific audience, then I don't know how many data scientists would be like, yeah, this works. If they were a government agent, then it would be fine. No, right? But
the show that I think has done the best job at capturing technologists and data people has been Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Right.
Hands down.
It
was like well studied. They had a lot of good advisors on that show. But Silicon Valley, I mean, that was basically a documentary of part of my life.
It's mostly like Mr. Robot is really good, right?
Yeah, Mr. Robot, I think
watched it, but yeah,
I watched about half a season of that. I thought it was decent. And there was, what was I thinking of? There was another one that I thought was pretty decent, but regardless, I mean, it was. We could try. Hey, if any companies want me to come consult on films, books, whatever it is, I'm there for it. Those are fun.
Yeah, SQL cheat sheets. Yeah, the whole 9 yards, man. He's got it all.
We'll get you guys the best SQL cheat sheets that are out there.
You can have it on. It's a background prop, basically.
Exactly. On the computer screen
next to the Vim cheat sheet.
Yeah. Exactly. Oh my god. Well, amazing. This was so awesome to have you both.
Yeah, thanks.
And you guys having me into Utah. So. Thank you for coming on. Anything you want to share? Obviously the book is The Fundamentals of Data Engineering. I'll leave a link in the description. Yeah. Anything else people should know or I
mean, I'm giving a lot of talks this year. So come find me in your city if I happen to be there. But yeah, I guess new book popping out later this year. So that's also happening. But I don't know about you, Matt.
Yeah, we'll stay tuned. I guess I'll
find you at bar mitzvahs or doing birthday parties.
That's right. I'll be doing
singing karaoke at the Sloppy Oyster on Thursdays.
Yeah, we'll be doing SQL karaoke. We'll be singing data analyst themed songs.
We'll be giving you selections.
Salt Lake City and New York. I'll stay tuned. We'll see what's coming down the pipe soon.
He's got a generative AI company coming out. So if there's any VCs out there that want to fund it, I'm just kidding.
Well, I'm actually going to replace myself with generative AI and then just fly my body to Mars. That's my current plan.
Hey, that is the future. Well, amazing, guys. Thank you so much again for coming on.
Anytime, Ken. All right.